Okay, further continuing our analysis of what chance Chinese EVs have in the US, we've basically discovered that the equivalent Chinese EV would cost about $15,000 more than a Tesla due to import cost and Tesla's local rebates. Of course, when I say equivalent, it's really the best the Chinese can do, which is still significantly far behind Tesla in every capacity. I'm comparing more just with the range and price, being the two biggest metrics when evaluating EVs. Alright, what else might make it difficult for the Chinese EVs in the US? Well, range is a much bigger deal for US drivers than in Europe. I've driven across the US coast to coast and back again. It's a big country. Unlike Europe, the US doesn't have a great passenger rail infrastructure either. Americans do like to drive. Therefore, as a market in general, the US do like longer range EVs. Although obviously the charging infrastructure is helping improve this, but it's still a thing. So as the Chinese cannot offer long enough range, it instantly cuts out a lot of the US market. This may also be part of the reason Tesla are not selling the standard range Model Y yet in the US, although there is a possibility that they might when Texas is up. On the other hand, they may be able to get by the 4680 batteries and won't offer the US standard range version until Tesla have their own in-house LFP batteries, which are going to be considerably more energy dense than the CATL LFP batteries Tesla currently use. The Chinese EVs that do have longer range, they use nickel-based batteries, which means they will struggle to ramp up to any decent volume anyway. The reason the Chinese can get such high levels of production is simply by using the LFP batteries. The legacy autos are making a more larger effort with nickel batteries and have a lot more money to solve that problem. The Chinese EVs are coming in at the lowest cost they can and don't seem to be making these enormous investments that we hear about with the legacy autos of $30 to $50 billion. Now, we're familiar with how it is possible to lie with statistics, and when you get into the weeds, not everything is quite as it appears. I want to dispel some of these myths about Chinese EVs, as I'm starting to think they're heavily overrated. I'm going to take the numbers that Inside EVs provide us for September. We had 355,000 registered plug-in electric vehicles. Now, already we have a distorted figure. Plug-in electric includes plug-in hybrid. Even legacy autos won't struggle overly to make enough of those, particularly if they're getting over $8,000 off in subsidies. Therefore, I can't see Chinese plug-in hybrids having any chance against the US market. Inside EVs does mention that 15% are plug-in hybrids. Now mention this is quantity of cars sold, which will not be the same relation as kilowatt hours of batteries produced, which is what really matters. That's the true sign of success and progress when it comes to EVs. So what are the Chinese doing to alter these figures? Well, it would appear that the batteries in a lot of these vehicles are actually quite small, which means there'll be more batteries to go around to make more cars. The number one selling EV in China is, as you guessed, the Wuling Death Trap. This accounted for over 10% of the sales at 35,000 and was actually over 40,000 in August. Is this a sign that the Chinese EVs are doing as well as they say? In fairness, I know I say that Tesla is the only EV to hit volume production, but in reality, the Wuling is actually the only other one, by definition. But it's very easy to manufacture as it's so basic. It doesn't even have airbags. No one else to this day has achieved volume production of EVs. No one. Do you think there might be a reason? Do you think this is why Elon keeps saying hitting volume production is hard, let alone to do it at a profit, which Elon says is excruciating? And Elon is incredibly talented, has an engineering mind, and has the assistance of as many rocket scientists as he requires. Volume production is how you hit economies of scale. But to be honest, I don't personally include this as an EV. It's close to an electric bike with seats and a shell. It can't be sold in any developed nations due to it being so unsafe, let alone its impracticality when it comes to range of about 50 to 70 miles EPA with 9 and a 14 kilowatt hour battery, and top speed of 60 miles an hour. I do not classify this as a real EV. I also do not classify this as a Tesla competitor. I think the Wuling has a market and it's addressing that market, but it will not be competing with Tesla in any of Tesla's markets. But it's an affordable way for many people in China to own their own vehicle that offers enough range for their day-to-day travels. So I don't think we can count the Wuling sales as they distort the numbers so much. Tesla was actually very close behind the Wuling in sales with the Model Y at 33,000 units compared to 35,000 for the Wuling, despite the Tesla costing about 10 times the price. Bear in mind that this is Tesla's sales in China, not production. They exported a lot of them too. When Berlin is operational, Tesla will likely stop exporting to Europe and sell more in China. The Model 3 was next with 19,000 units. Next is the BYD Kin PHEV, a plug-in hybrid at 15,000 sales. Chinese hybrids have zero chance competing against US hybrids with huge rebates, so this does not count as a competitor to the US. Same for the next one, the BYD Song Pro PHEV, another 10,000 units. Okay, so we're up to the top 7 selling EVs in China, and none of them count as competition to Tesla. Well, not just competition to Tesla, but actual BEVs that can be sold overseas. None of these are yet counting. Next is the BYD Quin EV, an actual BEV. These get 43 miles of range, and that's likely NEDC, not something sufficient for overseas. Another 8,000 units that doesn't count. Then the Chang'an Binai EV, which with an NEDC range of 300 kilometers or 130 miles range EPA, not sufficient for overseas market. Another 8,000 units not suitable for overseas. Next, the BYD Han, our first real contender at almost 8,000 units. This is a real EV, and I talked about it in my last video. In reality, it ends up costing $15,000 more to compete in the US against a Tesla, and its specifications are disappointing. Next, the GAC Ion S. This is electric, but scrapes in about 220 miles of range. Hardly that compelling, at about $25,000 without subsidies. And last on the list, XPeng P7 actually has 244 miles of range EPA and over $38,000 without credits. Of course, even more expensive if exported to the US with a 20% tariff and shipping costs, when compared to a Model 3 Tesla at almost 280 miles of range for about $37,000 after subsidies. And XPeng is not yet a profitable company. So none of the Chinese can make cars with any decent range. The best was BYD by stuffing in a lot of extra batteries, affecting handling and performance dramatically, even though they are in-house batteries that are superior to the LFP batteries Tesla are using from CATL. Wait, what about NIO? Shouldn't we mention them? They actually do have some vehicles of a reasonable range. It's 304 miles, although it requires a 100 kilowatt-hour battery to achieve that, and that's a nickel battery too. Tesla gets 358 miles from 82 kilowatt hours in their long-range Model 3, and the NIO would cost something like $80,000 or so to export to the US. But it actually is a reasonable car, but for that price, there are plenty of better alternatives. And NIO didn't even enter the top 10 of EV sales in China. And to ramp up with nickel-based batteries, then you have to do what all the legacy orders are doing, except NIO likely can't throw $30 to $50 billion at that problem. I suddenly feel slightly more bullish on legacy autos. Maybe they do know what they're doing after all. And as we've seen how crazy Rivian's valuation is, then perhaps there may be something in it for them. If the Chinese want some decent range, then they have to use nickel batteries. But even legacy autos are ahead of them on that game. Legacy autos realized that to compete with Tesla, they need to also offer sufficient range, up to around 300 miles. Mary Barra even said that's what their customers told them. Of course, none of these companies make a net profit yet either. None of them have 4680 batteries on the way soon. None of them have even dramatically cheaper, again, LFP batteries coming next year. None of them are remotely close to FSD, and none are making computers on wheels. But perhaps we're just looking at this with our blinders on and too focused on where we live, in these developed countries, and the fact the Chinese are able to offer lower cost alternatives, albeit with inadequate range for us and not very safe. Well, it's a big world out there, and there may be plenty of other nations that have consumers that can afford $5,000 to $10,000 on an EV. Of course, I think these markets will be eaten up by Tesla's robotaxis. Okay, let's wrap this video up and do more analysis in the next one. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.